जैसे हर बच्चे को पोलियो का टीका, वैसे ही हर बीज को वीटावैक्स का टीका। इस्तेमाल करें वीटावैक्स पावर और बनाएं हर बीज को दमदार वीटा बीज। देश के किसानों का विश्वास, धानु का।
लगता है हाउस वार्मिंग में सबको इम्प्रेस करके छोड़ोगी।
तुम अपने काम पे ध्यान दो।
जी मैडम। एक बार आके देख लो, कहीं मैंने कोई गड़बड़ तो नहीं कर दी।
सिर्फ मेरा नाम क्यों?
अरे जिसने घर खरीदा है उसी का नाम होना चाहिए ना।
और फ्रेंड्स क्या कहेंगे?
फ्रेंड्स कहेंगे कि काश अपनी बीवी भी ऐसी होती।
पिछले 100 सालों से ऐसी हर अच्छी शुरुआत का साथ दे रहे हैं हम और हमारी न्यू एज बैंकिंग सर्विसेज यूनियन बैंक ऑफ इंडिया।
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Rajlakshmi. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Rama, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. So welcome to the BusinessLine webinar on Agri reforms. I know I have more than 2,000 of you with me online now. Thanks for joining us. Hope all of you are safe. Please stay home. So today, as you know, people say that when the going gets tough, the tough get going. the Center and the Ministry of Agriculture have, over the last few months, done a lot of work to bring things in order in the farm sector. So today we are here to discuss those reforms and how these are going to be a game changer for people connected with the farm sector, right from the farmers to the processors and everyone, each participant in the supply chain. So I know that a lot of you have questions for us. So you can send in your questions through the Q&A window. And towards the end of the discussion, I'll take up each of the questions, if time permits, all of them also. And so I have three eminent people from the industry joining me today for this discussion. I have with me Mr. S. Sivkumar, Head of Agri and IT from ITC. I have Mr. Ramanjanalu, who is the Executive Director of Center for Sustainable Agriculture. And I also have Mr. Ashok Dalwai, Chairman of Doubling of Farmers Income Committee from the Government of India. So, before we actually move in and start in, I would like to thank our sponsors for the day. Our webinar today is presented by NABARD and powered by Union Bank of India and Dhanuka Agritech. So, I would like to start this discussion with giving a brief background on how things are going on for the agri sector, because all of us know during the tough times such as the present, there are a lot of possibilities that for people to not get the correct pricing in the market for their goods. So I would like to place my first question with Mr. Ashok Dalwai. Sir, can you hear me? I think maybe he'll join us. Maybe
looks like he just dropped.
Yes. So, Mr. Shivkumar, why don't we start with you today? Because there are a lot of reforms, particularly focused towards the smallholder farmers to help them get better pricing in the market. So, as a corporate, when you look at these reforms, which one do you think is going to turn beneficial for the farmers immediately?
So I think the fact that all of them have been done together is what makes a lot of sense for all the stakeholders, including farmers. Because over the years, there have been multiple reforms that were discussed and there is some progress. But I think the fact that Essential Commodities Act, the Agriculture Marketing, as well as Farming Agreements, all three have been done together, along with other things which have been done in terms of some investment support. I think all of that really makes sense. I think out of all of this, if you look at it in the short run, what might help is the trade facilitation and the longish name which is there, that particular ordinance which is likely to come out.
Right.
Is that almost instantly multiple channels will get started so that the crops which are standing could get also sold beyond the APMC markets where they're getting marketed. In fact, already in the early days of COVID, we have seen some states moving forward and reforming their APMC acts also, making way for this kind of sales. And there is some progress because of that. And this additional central ordinance which will now come in, which will coexist and complement with APMC, I think that is something which is going to be more immediate opportunity for multiple to get opened up, all the channels to compete with each other and then provide that kind of a value.
True.
While doing all of this together is what I consider is the landmark effort at this point of time.
Right, sir. Mr. Ashok Dalwai, I would like to have a few questions with you before we get on to details of all the three reforms. With the number of announcements that have come in over the last 1 month, there are a lot of reservations that farming community, the farm activists and others have. So though personally I have a positive view about these reforms, I have to I'm going to keep my opinions aside for now and bring to you some questions from people on the ground, the farmers and other people. So one thing everyone is worried about is, with the Central Act coming in, will procurement at the farm gate, procurement from the farmers, from the mandis, stop by the central government? That's one big doubt which everyone is having. The other thing is there is a fear that farmers will be left will be left to the mercy of the private trade, will be left to the mercy of the free market forces. And third thing everyone is worried about is whether this act is going to stop completely the powers of APMCs and state government with respect to agriculture. So can I have your answer, sir?
Yeah, thank you very much, Raj Lakshmi. And let me take this opportunity of offering clarifications on the confusions that many people across the country must be having. Let me begin where I should begin. The challenge that agriculture in India has been facing over the last 10 years is one of monetization of the agriculture produce. Indian agriculture has transitioned from one of deficiency in 1960s to one of adequacy in 70s and 80s. And thereafter, in the last 2 decades, we have reached what is called a situation of surplus. All of us must appreciate that market prices are determined by this demand and supply position. Given the context of surpluses in certain segments of the agriculture commodities, it is obvious that the farmers are not getting good prices in the market.
Correct.
The answer therefore lies in creating a balance or what is called equilibrium between the demand and supply position. That will happen if we are able to evacuate the surpluses from the production zones to those demand centers by removing all kinds of barriers that may be emanating from law, that may be emanating from inadequacy of infrastructure, or also emanating from lack of information, or what is popularly called as asymmetry of information.
Right.
Now, what this government has been trying to do over the last 6 years to correct this particular imbalance. Now, the whole objective is to monetize the agriculture produce so that the farmers are able to convert their marketable surpluses into money,
right,
to optimal amount of money. And that serves as an incentive for the farmers. After all, the returns that the farmers or any entrepreneur gets on his business from his production is going to serve as an incentive for the farmers to make savings, to plow it back as capital investment into new technology, into new infrastructure, and keep growing up in terms of productivity and production. And as I was telling you, since we have certain surpluses, now we also now need to create a new paradigm. And that new paradigm has to be the post-harvest segment. So that includes the agri infrastructure in terms of storage and transportation. It includes the agriculture processing in terms of food and non-food processing. And third one is the final arbiter, that is the markets.
right,
As we all know, the first effort towards reforms in agriculture markets began much before independence, but more robustly after independence, beginning 1960s. So much maligned as the APMCs may be, APMCs were the first set of reforms that brought some kind of method to the madness that existed in the agriculture markets to the village traders in our country. However, over the last 60 years, APMCs themselves have become monopolies because they were the sole and they have continued to be the sole arbiter of the agricultural producers. So what government is now doing is to create a new market architecture where we are able to enable competition and transparency in price discovery. As Mr. Shikumar was rightly saying, we now need to have an alternate to the APMCs so that the farmers are able to tap the best services in terms of the price discovery and the access. So when we have APMCs, both in the government sector and the private sector, we're creating a competition. Within the APMCs also, we need to have intermarket competition.
right,
The best corollary is that of the telecom sector, where we had the monopoly of BSNL, which was broken by a large number of private sectors coming in, and that's how the consumers have stood to benefit. And there are many examples, including air services. So likewise, agriculture markets today will stand to benefit from public sector and private sector markets within the APMCs. And now, as a competition to the APMCs, we shall have the direct trade, both intrastate and interstate, that will be now made possible under the ordinance that Government of India is going to bring out. So there too will have again private and public sector, mostly private sector that's going to play an important role there. So when we have that inter-channel competition, obviously the farmers are going to benefit. Now, your specific question is government going to stop procurements? Let me emphatically say no. I mean, everybody who's hearing me, be clear that government is not stopping procurements. Once again, let me take you to the issue of the basics of marketing. That we would like markets to be reformed, agriculture markets to be reformed, so that the price discovery is to the advantage of the farmers through transparency, through objectivity, and better market integration. However, we know world over, not just in India, that agriculture markets can never be perfect. No market for that matter, even within the industry sector, within the service sector, markets are never perfect as we read in economics. And agriculture markets, exposed as they are to the fluctuations of supply, thanks to the dependence on monsoons, we can never be able to control the supply. And therefore, there'll be always fluctuations within the markets vis-a-vis agriculture. Therefore, what government is saying is, while our first intervention will be to create a competitive, transparent, objective market structure so that the farmers start benefiting from competitive price discovery, simultaneously recognize that there will be fluctuations and therefore there will be need for administered prices, intervention. Therefore, the minimum support price, which is actually a price signal based on the cost of production and a certain profit of margin, is also the assurance to the farmers that in case the markets are not behaving properly to your advantage, I come and intervene. So let's be very clear that MSP-based procurement will continue. Okay, but however, we all must try to ensure that this procurement becomes only a last resort and the market should be able to do better. Let's also believe that the minimum support price is not a remunerative price. The remunerative prices must come from the markets. Minimum support price is a fallback social safety net for the farmers. And therefore, we hope that it is less to depend on MSP's better it is. Right. Okay, I would like to also give you a good news to you that over the last 4 years, we have started broad basing MSP procurements. We have a scheme called PM Asha, under which, as you all know, now the procurement of commodities has gone beyond and wheat and paddy, which was the norm till 2014-15. In 2015 till now, right, the procurement of pulses has gone up to around 18 to 20% of the total production. That of oilseed has gone up to 11%. And the state governments have also been advised that they should start procuring the nutri cereals, that is millets, like jawar and ragi and bajra. Only condition being that whatever has been procured by them must be utilized by them in some way. For example, welfare programs or the public distribution system. Right. So to cut it short, I would say that we will be aiming at a competitive, robust market through alternate market channels. And simultaneously, we will have the fallback mechanism in terms of MSP and MSP-based procurements so that there is an assurance to the farmers that there is somebody to do it. So the whole basket of reforms we'll discuss as we go forward, that the new ordinance that the government has promised in terms of Central Trade Act, which will promote intrastate and interstate trade, and then the conversion of the Contract Act, which was a model contract farming act, which was shared with the state governments in 2018, now gets as a central legislature, so that the entire country will have one type of the contract farming act. These two, supported by the Essential Commodities Act liberalization, now create a context for free and fair markets in the country. Yes. So there are many things that we can discuss, and I think I will just leave it at this particular point. Sure. That we should also remember that when we create a market opportunity, it is not necessary that farmers or any stakeholder will directly benefit unless they get support in terms of other things. And what is that support? How do we prepare the farmer to be a strong stakeholder in the market vis-a-vis the traders, vis-a-vis the corporate houses, vis-a-vis the entire market environment, is something that also we must keep in mind if we want the market forces to actually succeed. Thank you.
So basically, we are trying to say that under the APMC structure itself, there will be a public mandi and there will be a private market. And besides these two, there will also be a area. The area which is outside of the APMCs will be coming under the Central Act for trading purposes. So this area, sir, which will be where the farmers can trade freely without any restrictions. There, who will control? Will there be a regulator for this market? How will pricing be, controlled in this market or regulated?
Yeah. So what we are now really asking is what will be the mechanism for price discovery?
Correct,
Now, at
exactly,
the
sir.
APMCs, we have a system of auctioning where the price discovery happens. Now, outside the APMCs, what is called a trade zone is where direct trade will happen between the farmers and the traders from across the country.
Correct.
Now, the price discovery mechanism will not be through an auction system, but what will happen is that since we are now integrating the entire country as one market, and then the information will be shared with the farmers will be able to make an informed decision as to whether they're getting a right price or not. What we really hope is the monopoly or the cartelization that happens at the APMCs because of less number of traders will
Okay.
now get neutralized because larger number of traders will now actually come into the play outside the APMCs. And as long as there are large number of quotations for the same commodity that the farmer is going to offer for sale, we hope that there will be automatically a good price discovery.
Okay.
And in any case, the APMC benchmark is already there. The
Correct.
farmer has a choice that if he feels he's not getting a good price outside the APMCs in the trade zone, then he's
Right.
always free to go into the APMCs. And what we think is not just from the farmer's perspective, but also from the trader perspective, once the cartelization and the monopoly that exists today in Indian marketing condition is broken, there will be competition. And then, as far as regulation is concerned, yes, there will be an authority which will be an arbitrator, which will ensure that the policies, programs, guidelines, rules, etc., are all introduced, so that the fair trade that should happen between the trader and the farmer will happen. Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay, sir.
I think we must keep that particular thing in mind. Yeah.
Sure, sir. Sure. Mr. Ramu, I would like to ask you on this because you have been long working with smallholder farmers in many states. So, what is the level of inefficiency in the market structure at present? And do you think these reforms which the government is proposing now will help really the small and marginalized farmers?
I think we need to just take a step back and then look at what is the crisis which farmers are in general undergoing, and then particularly in the last 2 months of this lockdown, because these reforms were brought in the context of lockdown COVID-19 and then talked about as part of this one. So one of the thing is India, the small and marginal farmers, their incomes is a challenge. We have monthly incomes of just about 8,900 rupees per month. And in that, just about 35% comes from cultivation and about 35% comes from wages. And that's the situation in which we are. So back end, there is a lot which needs to be done in terms of improving the incomes of the farmers. So before we talk about the forward linkages. Second, we also need to think of what kind of relief is given at this point of time because of the crisis, before we talk about long-term reforms, because the reforms certainly gives solace, but it's a long-term one. So what is that immediate relief which can be given? I think these two are important things which we need to look at. Coming to these reforms, these couple of reforms which are talking about, these reforms were also these policies. Say if you're talking about APMC, it's not only to regulate farmers to sell outside. It is also to create protection for the farmers against exploitation by the buyers. So in terms of payment, in terms of pricing, in terms of payment.
Sorry to interrupt, sir. Sorry to interrupt. You would have seen a lot of your farmers, in AP, Telangana, or also in other states. So there is always this issue of smallholders having a challenge to take their produce to the APMC mandi because it's 20-30 kilometers far away. So what kind of challenges do a small farmer face when it comes to marketing of his produce?
No, see, one of the major challenges is about the distances. It is better if they can sell locally, always. Second is about the volumes which they have. the main problem with all the small and marginal farmers is the volumes which they have. So with that kind of volumes, they cannot go a long distance and sell also. And also they cannot have a bargaining power. So how do we increase the bargaining power by aggregation is something which one need to look into. Coming to the markets, so like to continue what I was saying earlier, to create that protection. So if they sell locally, there are payment issues, there are payment issues, there's a lot of delays which are done, and also in terms of pricing. There's much lower price which is being paid. So last 4 years, 3 years, if you see, in red gram prices were much lower in the market. So farmers got much lower than the minimum support price. So given that kind of situation, when you are removing some of these restrictions in the existing act, what kind of new protections we provide is something which is very important, particularly when we are trying to create, open up. Because within the APMC itself, if you are unable to do these regulations, outside the APMC, how do we do is something which is very, very important. And similarly, Essential Commodities Act also is more to provide protection to the consumers. It's not so much to the producers per se. So it's more to the consumers.
Yeah. So before we actually move on to discussions over the Essential Commodities Act, Mr. Shiv Kumar, I would like to have a question with you. So all of us, all of us have this thought that, if a farmer is able to sell his produce at the farm gate or, at his home itself to a buyer, that would be great for him, because there is no transporting and there's no other challenges which he will face. But when we look at the other side, the angle of the corporates, from the view of the agri processors or the exporters who are on the buying side, so why don't they come forward to buy at the farm gate? Because if you look at different states, say for instance, Maharashtra or even Madhya Pradesh, we see people preferring to go through the Mandi network, through the APMC channel, rather than buying directly from the farmers. So from a buyer's point of view, what is the challenge that is there?
Yeah, so basically, like both Dr. Dalwai and Mr. Ramu have mentioned earlier, first, the farmer's perspective, the reason why APMCs made sense is because that was a competitive price discovery mechanism compared to selling off in the village at some price that we don't know whether it is good enough or not.
Right.
Now, from a farmer to say that, okay, now I will sell in the village itself, you need a price discovery mechanism in the village. And that is where I think the developments in the digital area are going to help. I mean, of course, this is not new. 20 years ago, the reason why e-Chopal infrastructure came in is because one could discover competitive prices in the village where mandi prices were known, ITC prices were shared, and price of other third parties were known, and in various markets. So farmer has one more option besides the APMC to say that now I can sell here if this price is better for me. And in order to actually make this happen on part of the buyers, that you need to create certain infrastructure in terms of whether it is a digital infrastructure, whether it is a quality testing in the village itself so that the price is known there, or whether it is the transportation and storage infrastructure. So there are many aspects which need to be built in. And in order to build all of that, you need to create a model that the cost of transportation and all this infrastructure should be more than paid for in the way that you are able to procure it directly. And it should not come out of paying lower price to the farmer, then it defeats the purpose.
Correct.
So, for example, the way it worked for all these years for us is because having bought from the village directly from the farmers, we were able to preserve the identity of the produce. Otherwise, once it comes to mandi, the variety and the quality gets commingled with other cargo, and you lose out that opportunity to preserve the identity. Okay. So you preserve the identity and create value as an opportunity, and then create that larger pie in which you retain some margin out of it and you pass on a fair value to the farmer. So that's how the business models will get created in the new environment. But the question mark as to why some of these things don't happen as much as they should be is twofold. One is that once you make all these investments, until now, until let's say the essential commodities Act gets liberalized, when we see that final announcement, that you make all this infrastructure and the viability of all of this happens when I procure, let's say, 10,000 tons in a cluster. Right. And then essential commodities impacted, and then say that, okay, now you can't store more than 100 tons. Right. And then that investment becomes unviable. So that's always a Damocles sword which was hanging so far, to say that I make investment, it doesn't become viable, so why should I make an investment? I would rather go back to APMC and buy or something. The other angle is that when you are engaged in dealing with a large number of farmers and creating this kind of infrastructure, you need other mechanisms. Digital is one way that you could look at. Potentially some form of collectives, FPOs is another method, cooperatives or whatever kind, all of that. Some method of aggregation which reduces the transaction cost for the buyers, and which enhances the bargaining power of the farmers and lowers the transaction cost for them also. Correct. I think that mechanism also needs to fall into place. And once again, to make all of that happen was not possible till now, because the APMC Act prohibits any transaction outside the four walls of Mandi until it was reformed in whichever states they were done over these many years. So where it is opened up, we could do those kind of transactions outside and create these longer term engagements. But where it is not, then you just know where that you could have a direct engagement with the farmer in whatever form, whether it is direct buying or contracting or any other method that made sense, was not possible. I think once these reforms are now making it far more predictable than for us to go and say, okay, now every year we get a license renewed, or we take 20 different licenses in a state to operate like this. All of that cumbersome process will go away with more predictable environment. So that is what will then make it possible for other buyers also to come forward and make these kind of investments. Because it's in the buyer's own self-interest, like we have implemented and figured out how our brands get supported with these identity preserved value chains and so on. And it's a win-win for the both farmers as well as for the marketeers. So that kind of competition is what will get opened up. It's not one more Mandi, which is exactly like APMC, which will get replicated. Correct. That also is possible. But depending on the crop value chains, locations, existing infrastructure, what is the better method of price discovery, all of that, there will be many more models that different people will innovate, either from the buyer side or from the seller side. True. So, for example, Amul is an innovation from the seller side. Similarly, FPOs can innovate from the seller side and get digitally aggregated and make that happen. So where innovation will come from, there is no bar. Once the framework and the architecture that Dalbhai talked about is open for anybody, rather than forcing everybody to go within those four walls and transact. I think that is a fundamental difference, and that's why I believe it's a game changer, the question that you really are posing. Right, sir. So, Dalbhai sir, I'd like to have a question with you now. So now that we are talking about the infrastructure requirement for the agri value chain participants, so the government has announced that there will be a 1 lakh crore of investment around this. So how will this come through, sir? Will it be a PPP mode of investment, which they are looking at, or what is the thought process in this?
Yeah, now I won't be able to give you the specifics. So much, let's remember that government is now facilitating through this Atmanirbhar package of rupees 1 lakh crore to strengthen both forward and backward linkages that are necessary for different segments of agriculture to link up both production and consumption zones. Now, when we talk of agriculture, it is not just crops. Unfortunately, that alone continues to dominate our perception. Today, when we're talking about farmers' income, nutrition for the consumers, and for robust agricultural growth, we should be looking at all the four segments of agriculture: field crops, horticulture, livestock, fisheries, and aquaculture. So this rupees 1 lakh crore plus rupees 10,000 crore for the micro food the facilities is what is going to actually facilitate harvesting all the potential for growth that exists in each of these segments. Now, how are we going to make it happen? We already have tested in the last 5 years to operate what is called a corpus fund based investments in gross capital formation in agriculture. Okay. For example, in 2016, government announced what's called AIBP, Accelerated Irrigation Benefit Projects, to complete the long pending, incomplete 150 irrigation projects that were pending since 1996. As phase one, 99 projects were taken up, creating a corpus fund of the size of rupees 80,000 crore. And we've already seen that over the last 4 years, large number of pending irrigation projects have been completed and commissioned. And when all these projects are completed, we're going to have 7.6 million hectares additional area under the irrigation.
Okay.
Likewise, we have had the experience of creating a corpus fund of micro irrigation, a corpus fund for ENAM. We already have the experience. So when we are now going to do these things, a lot of that investment will happen in this manner. And more importantly, the reforms that have been effected to the agriculture marketing structure through the Central Trade Act, to the Model APLMC Act, the Contract Farming Act, the establishment of the Gramin agriculture markets, promotion of 10,000 farmer producers organizations, etc. They all now enable the private sector to participate. Now, till now, unfortunately, our licensing system was so rigid that it did not incentivize the corporate sector to have belief in investment in support of government. But now both the domestic investments as well as the foreign direct investment, which has been allowed on the direct route for various agriculture related activities, will actually start bringing in cross capital formation. So this is extremely necessary if we want to build robust supply chains. How does actually the agriculture produce move from the remote interior villages to the centers of demand? We require agriculture value system. That means we must bring a large number of traders who will establish long chains of agriculture value chains, and simultaneously they integrate with the robust supply chains, and then what is called an agriculture value system. So that's what we're looking at. But as we build this kind of an infrastructure, what we are also looking at is to strengthen the farmers. What Dr. Ramanjanelu brought up is very important. After all, while we're doing all these things, we also believe that we need to improve the incomes of the farmers. The Ministry of Agriculture is now Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. For the first time, we have now moved away from the agriculture growth per se to the welfare of the farmers. So when you talk about welfare of the farmers, we must keep in mind that 86% of the farmers in India are small and marginal. So we are looking at organizing these farmers through farmers producers organizations, and then enabling them to have financial muscles. And that is going to come from two interventions. The first intervention to enhance institutional credit to the farmers. For example, we were 8 lakh crore institutional credit in 2014-15. Now that has grown up to 13 lakh crore by 2020-21 for the current. So as we provide more and more institutional credit, we will wean away the farmers from the usurious money lenders. And simultaneously, we have also amended what is called the Kisan Credit Card, KCC. KCC so far was available only to the farmers who were growing either horticulture or field crops. For the first time, the 2018 Union budget made it available to the livestock managers, operators. So today, somebody has got a cattle, a buffalo, or a small ruminant will also be able to access the Kisan Credit Card facility. So what we're really looking at is to build the financial muscles so that he is able to negotiate strongly with the trader, whether it is on the APMC or outside the APMC, unless we give that financial strength and that bargaining power and the information power through the digital technology that Dr. Shivkumar was talking about, will not be able to put the farmer at par with the traders. It is very important that we now strengthen the farmer in terms of his bargaining abilities, and then he is able to actually ask for a better price. I guess the new technology combined with this strong infrastructure and strong institutional credit and information power is what is going to actually help take advantage of all these things. So let me assure you that this rupees 1 lakh crore package that has been announced will see through because of the new reforms that have been brought out, and then simultaneously the private public sector model becomes possible, or corporate sector investment per se becomes possible, and just as individual investments through farmers also becomes possible. So I think we're looking at multiple channels to converge at the field level.
Okay, sir. Point taken, sir. Yeah. Ramu, sir, I would like to ask you this, because when we are talking about infrastructure facilities for the farmers, we know the state is, the country is in a very, bad situation when we are talking about warehouses or cold stores, because when there is a price crash, we see farmers throwing their horticulture produce on the roads. So is this kind of an approach to bringing in infrastructure the right way? Or is something missing from the eyes of the policymakers, you think, sir? Because all the while also, over the last 10 years, we have tried a lot to bring in investments in cold stores and warehouses for farmers at the farm gate level. So what is missing in this link, you think, sir?
What is missing is also about production planning. Production planning is not done well. So much of the glut in the market happens because of that. And farmers throw away because even there is no storage value. So if you store also, there's an investment on that. And finally, the price discovery after storing also is not very economical. So it's not economical even to store some of these products. Actually, having a good production planning is something which is important. So production planning based not only on the soil types and weather conditions, but also on the market demand. So the demand supply information to farmers is something which is very, very critical. And organizing farmers at the cluster level so that they could actually come up with a better production planning is something which is very important. Then only aggregation also can happen. So today, the problem is it's every individual farmer's decision. And that decision is not backed by informed choices. It's not even informed choices. So basically, it's the pulls and pushes happens, and then various other interests which drives the current planning. So that's what is leading to the problem. So I think what is missing out in the whole process is how do we strengthen the extension system, and then how this extension system can be connected to the farmer producer organizations. Because today, if you look at even though we were talking about farmer producer organizations for a long time, the Department of Agriculture acts independently. Department of Horticulture acts independently, NABARD acts independently, and then these three integration is not happening. So we need to work on how we can integrate these things. Second, very important when we talk about farmer producer organizations, see currently the FPOs are governed with the Companies Act. And so the Companies Act is written to control, say, organizations like ITC. So I think FPCs should have a separate law instead of having just a small few clauses. I think it should have actually separate law. I think the government should also think of coming up with a new legislation, complete independent legislation for FPOs. Then it makes it much easy to organize and improve the governance at the FPO level. Few important issues when it comes to the FPO. It takes about 5 to 6 years for any community organization to stabilize and then get into the market. So proper investment in that area to build the capacities is something which is important. Today, if we talk about robust women self-help groups movement in this country, that has been built over a period of 50 to 20 years. So I think at least 5 to 6 years of investment in terms of building the capacities of the people, not only on the production side, but also on understanding the businesses, understanding the management. So that kind of investment is something which is important in addition to so it's a soft skills. So in addition to the infrastructure and all.
Correct.
And access to credit, I think, is an important issue. Even today, FPOs do not have access to credit. Because credit is linked to the share capital. And today we are talking about all small and marginal farmers who don't see a immediate benefit with FPO. So the investment made by them is very little, and private investment cannot come in there. So obviously the total share capital is low. So the amount of loan they can take is also low. So we need to come up with new loan products so that the farmers can have better access to credit. So FPO level credit, so individual farmers level credit, Dalwai talked about, but I think we also need to think of FPO level credit. And when it comes to the individual farmers level credit also, tenant farmers is still an issue. Most of the benefits which government is talking about are not accessible to the tenant farmers, particularly in states like Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, where their numbers are very high. So we also need to think of how we can extend all these benefits to the tenant farmers, and also most of these benefits are to go to the cultivators. We talk about even the PM Kisan or any of these direct income support measures. Many times landowners takes the benefit, not passing on to the producer. So that is one part of the story. But second part of it is, as an organization, access to better credit is something which is very, very important. And again, in terms of market intelligence and others, I think that is also another important gray area where government intervention is required. Currently, it is all very gray area. So farmers do not have any access to that. So what would be the fluctuations which happen, so how they can deal with that? Because today we are talking about small and marginal farmers who are unable to manage their 1 acre of land or 2 acres of land. So when we are talking about a farmers institution, so it's a kind of investment one need to make to build their capacities to understand that, and also support so that they can hire professionals for a while. So that handholding support is something which one need to look at.
Handholding is needed. Right, sir. So when we are talking about smallholder farmers, whenever there is a discussion, everyone wants to know how their bargaining power can be improved. Because with 1 acre of land, not much is he's going to produce, and looking at the amount he's going to use for self-consumption, the balance will be only 10-20%, which will take to the market. So in such a case, how to improve the bargaining power of a smallholder farmer in terms of yes, sir.
So in terms of bargaining power, I think it comes from quality of produce, diversity, good produce which they can come up with. I think that is something which is important. So getting into horticulture and getting into high value crops like medicinal and aromatic plants, I think that shift can help smallholders because they put in a lot of time in the farm, and then they also can put in more labor, family labor kind of thing. So I think there should be a shift in the cropping patterns also. But today they're unable to do it because there is no market access. So if market access can be improved, and then if irrigation possibilities comes in, and infrastructure facilities are created, credit access is created, proper extension services are created, I think this shift will happen.
Okay. And one more question, sir, because when we are talking about all of this, I think we should also discuss on contract farming, because a lot of if it is done well, then both parties, both the sponsor and the farmers benefit from it. So from the way the government is approaching contract farming through the Model Act and now through the ordinance also. So what is missing in this, sir? Because earlier also a law existed, but this didn't click for a small farmer because a lot of corporates keep shying away from engaging with small farmers. So what is the solution when it comes to this contract farming?
Two important challenges with the contract farming is the contract is between two unequals basically. So a big company and a very small holder. So what is the arbitration mechanism so that it can be resolved is important. So the arbitration mechanism should be independent and then effective. These two are also important. Otherwise, if it is in the hands of the government officer, again it becomes bureaucratic and corrupt as well. Because we have seen the way most of the agreements happen and then the way they are regulated. So we need to think of a good arbitration mechanism because say a big company having a contract with a small holder, if farmer doesn't sell as per the agreement, company may not lose much. But if company doesn't buy, farmer will lose.
Right.
Always. So that is the problem with this contract farming. So again, here if the FPOs comes in between as aggregators, and then if they can be the platform for such contracts, probably it helps. And also we need to bring in some kind of arbitrary mechanism. So that need to be defined. Actually, it was not very well defined in the earlier act. So probably we need to come up with that mechanism.
Okay, okay. Shivkumar sir, maybe you can tell us around this. The Contract Farming Act, the regulations and different aspects of it, is risk sharing as the law approaches it fair for both the sponsor and the farmer? What do you think, sir?
Yeah, so there are three different aspects here. When it becomes a zero-sum game between a farmer and the buyer, you are likely to have this issues forever when the bargaining power is unequal. While people can argue farmers have a part of the weaker power, the reasons corporates shy away that corporates believe they have weaker bargaining power because when there are farmer issues, whether it is government or whoever arbitrator says, no, farmers are too small, just let it be even if they are not on the right side. So corporates also shy away saying that, no, this is not going to be beneficial for us. So therefore, the aspect of quicker and inexpensive dispute resolution that Ramu talked about is critical. And in the new farming agreement, from what we heard so far, it is the SDM and the district collector as the mechanism. Although Ramu expresses reservations, I think this is a good via media compared to the conventional judicial process that is there. And the time limit is also set. I think probably will help. But besides this, there are two other points I want to flag on the zero-sum game issue.
Right.
One, where the contracts, even if they are unwritten, work very well when there is a reciprocal dependency between the farmer and the company which is writing that contract to buy produce. That unless I get the material, my factory will not run. When that dependency is there on the farmer, happens for a specialty produce.
Correct.
I make seed. Unless I have seed that is supplied by my farmers, I don't have access to something. Unless I get my organic material, I don't have my marketing commitments met. And so on and so forth. And vice versa for the farmers, unless the company complies, they are not going to benefit. So where it is reciprocal dependency, there nobody else needs to come and arbitrate. Nobody needs to come and say, write agreement like this. People will figure out a way. Yes, aggregation will help in whichever form, like already said earlier. The other method for large number of crops which are not like this reciprocal dependency, there are two systems. So one is where they are relatively less perishable crops, like grains and oil seeds and pulses and those kinds of things. Reliance on the derivative markets is an important institutional mechanism.
Okay.
That instead of planting material based on last year's prices, or some kind of intelligence that is produced by some people who have no skin in the game.
Correct.
Versus there are future prices, there are options which work also like MSP. Correct. And farmers don't need to directly participate. Automatically, they'll get plugged into the contracts if that mechanism exists. Or farmers can participate also through FPOs and otherwise.
Correct.
So importance of derivative market comes in for such kind of products. And for those which are perishable, where futures markets and derivative markets cannot provide that kind of an option, processing is the best route, whether it is done at a farm level, closer to the farmer, or by a processor at a higher aggregated level.
Okay.
More the processing happens, the pressure on the farmer to liquidate immediately doesn't exist. And therefore, that kind of infrastructure we talked about, which was holding it so far, and how some of these reforms will help in opening it up. So that was the context of how the food processing also can help. So looking at all of this together is how one should look at the farming agreements, rather than a very, very singular view of how can ever a farmer enter an agreement with some kind of a corporate, therefore this is a non-starter. That is one aspect of it, but all these other dimensions are also important.
Right, sir. So now that we have discussed, around the reforms and, the way forward. So how quickly do you think one can expect investments from the private sector, or what kind of solutions or answers will the private sector look at before, stepping up its investment in the agri-value chain space?
Yeah, in terms of steps going forward, first we need to see the fine print in the acts. The intent is quite clear. And one needs to specifically is how this translates into the acts. Second, after the acts are done, how the execution is going to happen through the various rules, because in the states where some APMC was reformed in the past, rules did not really let it progress by virtue of conditionalities which are kept there. And three, the level of alignment that exists between states who are primary actors in agriculture and some of these central acts, which seem to have been accomplished with some level of consultation which happened in the recent past. But I think combination of these things will work. I think lots of experiments happened over the last few years as these reforms happened in different states, in different commodities. A few things were exempted from some of this. So those things will help in a quicker expansion, like we would certainly do. And a few other things to see the full fructification of the intended benefit. I would see more in a 2 to 3 year kind of a time frame. That we would see that more investments will flow in.
Okay. All right, sir. Ramu, sir, one last question, from my end. So farmers always keep looking for a price support from the government, procurement support. So even now when there is a discussion about, one nation, one market, farmers are wanting a one nation, one price, a price which is fixed and which will guarantee them a return. So what do you, think about this kind of a price support mechanism? Is this even possible in the first place? And why do farmers keep, insisting on a price support mechanism rather than moving to the market?
Farmers have not moved into the market. On many crops, farmers moves into the market. So one of the reason for depending on minimum support price is that that's what is the maximum support price in many crops farmers can get. Say for example, in rice, in many areas, farmers are not getting that kind of price which even minimum support price has announced. In crops where they get better price, say for example, last 2-3 years, millets, if there is a better price, they're not coming to the market yard. They're actually selling away outside. Similarly, maize also, they were selling outside. So only they come to the market yard if there is a minimum support price is higher than the local market price. Many times local market prices are far lower than the MSPs which are announced. That's the situation kind of thing. Also, one of the things we also need to think of when we are talking about one nation, one market kind of thing. So between states, see, there are states where the cost of production is very high. Say if you take Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, per unit cost of every produce is far higher than the neighboring state. So while it becomes easy for other states to come and sell here at a cheaper that becomes remunerative for them rather than for the states like Andhra, Telangana to go and sell. So government's intervention in production so that the cost optimization happens and also better crop selections happens based on competitiveness and also soil suitability is also something which is very, very important. So price fluctuation is seen as a risk for the farmers. So wherever there is an MSP and a assured procurement, that is seen as a safety net for the farmers. So from a farmer's point of view, if you see minimum support price and procurement, these two are seen as a safety nets for them. So there is no fluctuation, there is an assurance kind of thing. So if other mechanisms, if we are bringing in, if they can also show that there is an assurance, probably farmers will shift towards that as well. So I think it's about creating that confidence in these mechanisms. Otherwise, in the last several years, we were talking about these mechanisms, but they never rolled out. And one of the reasons probably were because they were all talked about in independence, in isolation. They were never tried out together. So now that we are trying out together, we are also, government is also trying to invest on farmer producer organizations. It can also look into strengthening production and then resolve some of the issues in production. I think together they can solve all the problems. I think that's what we need to look at. Second important, one more point I want to say, like earlier I said, the income from cultivation is only about 35 to 40%. So other sources of income is also very important for farmers. So diversifying the income sources for farmers is also very critical. So income may not come from cultivation, but other sources also has to be added to the kitty. So how do we do that so that a livelihood mapping is done? We strengthen that and then investments flows into the FPO so that they can support farmers taking up 2-3 additional livelihoods. I think that is very important. And additional processing, primary processing, if it can be done at the village level, I think it can also provide additional opportunities for livelihoods as well as income. So both.
True, sir. True. Rightly you said, sir, that this is the first time that the farm issues are approached from all the angles. So hopefully, a better solution is seen this time. I think now maybe we can take up few questions which have come to us through the chat window. I think more than 200 questions now. So maybe a few of them will take it up. I think one question to Dalvai sir, is from a person, Mr. Ganesh. He's asking that, when APMCs were established in 1960s, the traders were new and everything was new and it was fine to start with. But over a period of time, they have formed cartels and things have gotten into a bad shape. So how are you sure that the same thing will not happen in the new trade zone that you want to open?
Yeah, I think you have answered it already there. Because we had monopoly, obviously the human interests took over the public concerns. We have now learned that lesson. So we have said very clearly in the model APLMC Act that has been shared with the states in 2017 that the responsibility and the mandate of the APMCs shall be confined to their boundary walls. Today, they have become zamindars of a district or a sub-district. In the new act, their role will be confined only to the boundary wall, which means that if the farmer comes there, then their rules will apply. Second, we have so far had only government APMCs. Much as we've tried since 2003, we have not had too many private markets. The reason was that the Model Marketing Act of 2003 empowered the APMCs to also control the private APMCs. So the Model APLMC Act 2017 takes away that power from the APMCs and gives a fair and equal opportunity for the private APMCs by creating a third-party regulator. So the third-party regulator will not be the managing director of the state agriculture marketing boards, but he'll be a director of agriculture marketing who shall be empowered to issue licenses to the traders and other functionaries, both in government APMCs and private APMCs. Third one is that the government APMCs also have been divested of their power to supervise the farmer producer organizations, contract farming, etc. Because that was all creating a conflict of interest. So now in the new market architecture, we have alternate opportunities. First, as I told you, within the APMC system, they shall be government and non-government competing. Second one, now the new channel that comes up is the trade, direct trade within the state and between the states. And both these channels, which will be competing with each other, are also now going to be supported by the digital platform. Okay. So now the problem was that the physically dispersed markets, either in the trade channel or in the APMC channel, were behaving like islands. They were behaving like their own powers. But what happens in the new digitally integrated system? The number of traders get integrated. Correct. So when we talk about one nation, one market, it is not that there will be the same price in Gadag of Karnataka and Gopalpur of Odisha. What we are now trying to say is that the traders will be able to access any market anywhere in the country. The farmers will be able to access any market anywhere in the country using the virtual platform. So when we bring in large number of traders from across the country bidding for the same commodity of the farmer in one particular village of Manipur, then obviously there will be better price discovery. Okay. And all this thing, when it is supported by what is called adequacy of infrastructure. The farmer in Manipur may know that there is a better price in Gujarat, but how does it reach out there? Or how does it Gujarat go and buy from Manipur? Yes. And we have got very good storage facility, very good transportation facility, very good pack houses, for example, reefer vans, for example. So I think the first time what we are looking at is a comprehensive package that consists of end-to-end solutions. Correct. But as Kumar was rightly saying, for all these things to fall in place, it will take a bit of a time. Okay. It's not a magic wand that today we have the law and tomorrow we start having benefit for everybody. They all work consistently. So we are creating an environment where monopoly is broken. And great. Ever since we introduced the virtual platform called Electronic National Agriculture Market in 2016, many people may be having a lot of criticism against that. But
Right.
then going to show results. How one key performance indicator of any success of a market is how many bids are there for a particular lot.
Correct.
Earlier, average used to have 2.8 bids for one lot of the farmer in this country. Today, it's gone up to 3.824. So that is the indicator. If there are more people competing for the same lot of the farmer, that universe of traders is increasing, the monopoly is being broken, and therefore farmers are expected to get better price.
Right.
But unless we strengthen the farmer in terms of bargaining capacity, that means he has got distress sale. You wait for 1 month, 2 months for the demand to pick up. So that's where I think the mantra of success will lie. So now your focus will be now on strengthening the farmers' capacity through the negotiable warehouse receipt system and many other interventions that government is planning. We hope that this will take it forward.
Sure, sir. Sure. Fair point, sir. So I have a question for Mr. Shiv Kumar. So Mr. Govind is asking a question. So he's basically saying that farmers are worried to sell to a corporate because he fears that quality testing may not be to the agreeable to both the parties. So will you propose an alternative where the quality is tested by a third party?
Yeah, certainly as the ground level infrastructure expands, this kind of opportunities will only increase. And one of the new frontiers of digital technology is that rapid testing of agricultural produce is also increased by virtue of the various kinds of new technologies, whether it is spectrography or whether it is infrared and many other methods. And it doesn't take a long time to assess the inherent quality of a produce. As these things scale, I think that opportunity also will come through. And even otherwise, I think what we have done, for example, in the eChopal system, is that one of the farmers represented in the village is supported with the necessary equipment to do the testing in the village. If a farmer comes to the factory or a warehouse, and then she or he is told saying that your quality is C grade, there's a problem. But when you do the testing in the village and say that no, this is C grade, and if it indeed is C grade, she can decide saying that okay, is this appropriate for me, and therefore should I sell it or not? I think that is enabled through what is called an eChopal Sanchalak, doing the testing and confirming in the village. So third-party testing is a common practice. I think it is just that testing must become, again, much like the dispute resolution we talked about earlier, swift and inexpensive. Because if it takes time and it is expensive to do it, it will defeat the very purpose of doing that quality assessment. I think new technology will also help in doing it, but new institutional arrangements also will make it possible.
All right, all right. One more question for Dalwai, sir. So a person by name Vinod has asked it. So he's saying that how will you ensure that abolition of Essential Commodities Act will not lead to hoarding from corporates in the name of investments, as they'll buy it low and sell at higher margin, raising the inflation. We have seen this in pulses in recent years.
Yeah, I think let's all remember that we had large number of control orders under the Essential Commodities Act.
True.
People of my generation, when we began our service 30, 35 years back, we also gave permission to buy cement. Unless I gave a slip to the coming customer to go and buy cement, the cement dealer would not release his cement. We gave permission to buy a tire for his car. Those were the days of shortages. Today, we have moved away from shortages to surpluses. So why does a trader need to, hoard when he knows that there's so much of surplus everywhere? Correct. So we don't need to be fearful of that. Now, why we needed this reform under the Essential Commodities Act, as far as agriculture is concerned, is, and on one hand, we are saying we want to break the monopoly. Whether it is a monopoly of the government or monopoly of the private sector, both are bad. APMCs are government organizations. They are also behaved like monopolies. BSNL was a monopoly, right? So if we would like now private sector to also come into the market, and we are telling the people to sell them, the private stockist tells us that you don't allow me to store more than 100 quintals of tur, not more than 400 quintals of potato. Why should I buy for the farmers, right? So the Essential Commodities Act, liberalization, goes hand in hand with the market reform, where we want free trade to happen. We want people to compete and buy as much as possible from the farmers.
True.
Please remember that if we want good prices to go to the farmers, it is not just giving them a good price. Say, for example, I get good price on 2 quintals of my paddy, but there is nobody to buy another 8 quintals that I have.
True.
So what we should be looking at is how do we enable the farmer to sell all the 10 quintals that he wants to sell? The wastage of food on account of various issues, including lack of market opportunities, is as high as 30 to 40%. In the year 2012, one assessment showed us that agriculture commodities worth rupees 93,000 crores got wasted in this country.
Correct.
Today, it would be not less than 2 lakh crore. So, control orders which restrict storage, which restricts movement, is not in the interest of the farmers. So, there is no question of that. However, the government always keeps the power with itself that in case of emergency, in case of war-like situation, in case of famines, or even in case where the market prices are shooting up so haphazardly to the disfavor of the consumers, then the government has the power to bring in. Now, this number is sovereign power. No power on earth can actually question governments anywhere on this earth. There's so much of power whenever it wants to. If tomorrow we want to make a rule, government can always make it. So I think we need not worry about that. And as I told you, we're already having surpluses. Our productivities are growing up. Our production is growing up. We are aiming at increasing from 1.2 billion tons of agriculture to at least 1.5 billion tons over the next few years. There will be more and more surpluses. So there will be no fear of any kind of hoarding or speculation. And a private trader has incentive to hoard and speculate only when he thinks that there is a shortage in the market. And the question of deficit does not arise in the 21st century.
Okay.
No need to. Okay.
Right, sir. Right. So another question I think someone has asked is, why doesn't the government of India introduce a farmer card, just like an Aadhaar card, and provide all the direct benefit transfers through that mode?
Yeah, I think right, we're slowly moving towards that. Aadhaar is the first unique identity that every citizen has got. When we start seeding Aadhaar number into different databases, whether it is relating to old age pensions or education or the farmers' entitlements, then the two together do serve as a unique marker for anybody, including the farmers. Today, we have already begun to build a central database. For example, when under PM Kisan, we need to transfer rupees 6,000 to the farmers, we're doing it. We are doing it electronically, and naturally, we need to have the address of the farmer, and that address comes from this particular Aadhaar number. Now, I think larger issue that you brought up is, can we move towards the income support from the current price support? Now, when the price support is there, that means we are giving subsidy on certain inputs or subsidy on outputs. For example, Dr. Ramanjaneli was talking about diversifying. Now, as long as our subsidy is linked to a particular kind, for example, I give subsidy on pulse, for example. Actually, the farmer is incentivized to grow pulse. If we say, I'll procure paddy, the farmer is bound to grow paddy, even though his agroclimatic zone does not permit of a paddy. So, over a period of time, I guess we should be moving towards income support. That means we say that this is the entitlement of the farmers. We give it to you. You decide what you want to grow. What does your agroclimatic zone benefit? I mean, how does it advise you? does market advise you, and what you would like to do. So over the course of time, I think the first step has been taken toward by introducing PM Kisan. That 6,000 rupees that is given to the farmer, it gives him the freedom to do what he wants to do. So when now remove all the subsidies on fertilizers, on food, on markets, and say take this money instead of the kind, then the farmer is a rational person. He will decide, all right, in my particular village, the average rainfall is 300 millimeters. I better go in for bajra. It is 2000 millimeter. My village in Assam, I grow paddy. Okay.
Right.
Farmer will try to will start exercising. To cap that particular argument, so far we have not believed our people in our country. We always, we have not had trust in our people. We have thought that if we give money, you start drinking it, you'll go and play cards and speculate, etc. But today, I think we all have realized that farmer, the landless agriculture labor, anybody, everybody is a rational human being. He knows what is his interest. And today, important is educated. Even if he's not educated, he has access to information. All right.
Correct.
So, and trust our farmers and also other people in the villages that they will take a rational decision. Just because one or two people divert it for some unproductive purposes, that does not become an example. One swallow does not make it a summer. So they're fully educated, highly educated guys who misutilize their documents. We can slowly move from this price supports to income support with a trust of people that they know what to do. That will be the time, I think.
There's a question for you, Mr. Shiv Kumar, from Narsam Kamath. So he's basically asking, what do you see as the top opportunity for use of new technologies in enhancing agribusiness in the country?
See, I think the most important opportunity that we have is delivering integrated and personalized advisory to the farmer to be able to produce what the customers want. It's the linking where today the customers around the world are seeking attribute-based product. Is it healthy? Does it help in my well-being? Is it nutritious? And so on. So instead of simply the physical specifications of things like color or density, now there is an opportunity to engage and say, does it have pesticide residue and so on and so forth. So what kind of a demand exists on part of consumers, institutional customers, and the range of such the demand side, feed it into the farmer and personalize recommendation on the basis of the agroclimatic conditions and the resources of the farmer. Water, for example, topsoil, many of these issues, because the reform focus we didn't really discuss today, but factoring them on the other side, how do you get a personalized advisory so that you are able to produce for the market in a remunerative form rather than try and produce and then see how best can I do to sell it. I think that transformation is what is possible through digital, because integrating many different people who can plug and play into the system. So that is our most recent version of eChopal. We call it eChopal 4.0. Essentially attempts to do this in stepping up the production to meet the demand and transferring a fair share of that to the farmer. I think that is what is possible today.
Right, sir, right. I think there's one question for Mr. Ramu. So basically a small farmer holding about 4 acres of land. So he's asking, do you think these reforms which the government is making is going to help me in any form?
I think farmers as individuals is extremely difficult to deal with the markets. So I think getting aggregation is very important. So you need to also see how together you form into a cooperative or a farmer producer organizations is something which is very, very important. Otherwise, you may have to go for very high value crops. That only can help. Otherwise, it's extremely difficult as a small farmer trying to deal with all this.
Yeah. All right. I think there are a lot more questions which I think we can take offline, maybe an answer through the offline mode or by mail replies. So thank you so much, gentlemen. It was nice having you all. It was a very productive conversation today. hopefully we take up all this from here on, through different policy initiatives, and hopefully the government is also listening to all of this, and soon a solution comes up for smallholder farmers and others. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you, Rajlakshmi. Thank you, my colleague.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And
Thank you,
to
Garu.
all the participants spread across the country who heard us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, namaskar.
Thank you, Ramu, sir. Thank you,
Thank you.
Shukla.
So Rajiv, will you send some of these questions because I think lots of them are there. We'll get a sense of the house.
Right.
When we look at all this, hopefully if we can just send by mail or whatever, that will be useful.
Sure, sir. I'll do that, sir. I'll do that.